Ayikwe. My name is Tiana Williams-Claussen, and I'm the director of the Yurok Tribe Wildlife Department and a Yurok tribal member myself. I have been privileged to be a part of bringing California condor, Pey-noh-pey-o-wok, back to Yurok ancestral territory, a dream which was fully realized in 2022. As some of you may have heard, or it might be news to you, we've unfortunately hit a very tragic milestone. We have lost the first of our condors. The condor in question was one well beloved by our crew and everybody who's been watching the successes of our story so far. A young male named Pey-noh-pey-o-wok, whose name means I am friendly or I am kind. And he was so named specifically because he seemed to just get along with everybody. Preening with the other condors, going into what we call the cuddle puddles, which is when they're all snuggled together, sharing food easily accepted by everybody else. You can't ever say you have a favorite child, but I gotta say he was one of ours. In January, the Northern California Condor Restoration Program team, which manages these birds on the daily, got what we call a mortality signal from our radio transmitters. All of our birds have satellite and radio transmitters so that we can keep track of them at all times. And a mortality signal does not necessarily mean that a bird has died, but it does indicate that there's something going on with that bird or that transmitter that requires immediate response. Maybe the bird is sick or injured. Best case scenario, they drop the transmitter and it's just not moving anymore. But if a bird has not moved for so long, we know we have to go in and check because that's what triggers the mortality signal. We received our mortality signal for Pey-noh-pey-o-wok on January 11th. And by January 12th, we had fully deployed to his last known location. After a full day's hike, we unfortunately did find the deceased body of B7 tangled up in some tree fall below what is a common condor perch for us. Further, there was a full flock of the other condors congregated around and watching. And so the worst was realized. The condors were telling us something was wrong, and ultimately we saw, in fact, that B7, as his visual tag says, or Pey-noh-pey-o-wok, was dead. As is protocol, we collected his body, and he was transferred to a forensics laboratory run by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Ashland, where they did a complete necropsy to determine the cause of death. As part of the full necropsy, and they found a lead pellet from an air gun. No conclusions were made at that time. His liver was sent off, bone samples were sent off, blood samples were sent off, all to see if that lead had actually gotten into his system. And in fact, it turns out that he had very high levels of lead in his liver and in his bones. Unfortunately, almost any raptor you can name is extremely susceptible to lead. Condors, absolutely, but bald eagles, golden eagles, any hawks, ravens, black vultures, they all are susceptible to lead poisoning. And just like for us as humans, it's a neurotoxin that causes a slow and pretty painful death. It causes their system to freeze up, and so they can starve to death from food not passing. They can be weakened such that they're more easily predated upon. But in any case, ultimately, without treatments, death is almost always the final result. This particular loss is hard because he was actually the youngest of our condors. He'd only been flying free for a few months, and it was completely preventable. We don't know where he picked up the pellet. This sort of round is usually used for varmint control, or people will take, shots at ground squirrels or other small game, though it is illegal to hunt with lead in California. People will even take pot shots at larger animals and just gets left in the body as legacy lead, even if it didn't kill the animal immediately. But I think it really highlights what was taught to me as you've got to be thinking all the time, growing up as a young Native woman. Even the smallest of choices can have a huge impact. And unfortunately, the smallest piece of lead can mean death for a condor or any of these species that we love. I do want to thank those members of our hunting and sporting communities who have already proactively made the transition to non-lead ammunition. Yes, it's the law, of course, but it can be a complicated thing to do. But I think it just shows how much hunters have always been on the forefront of conservation. It recognizes how we as hunters love the outdoors, love for things to be healthy and beautiful and abundant. So if you haven't yet had the opportunity to really dive into the whys and wherefores of transitioning to non-lead ammunition, which does not have the negative unintended consequences of use of lead ammunition, I absolutely encourage you to do so. There's some great resources out there. You can feel free to call us at the Yurok Tribe Wildlife Department, of course, but there's also a really great website called huntingwithnonlead.org. And it'll not only talk to you about the biology and the science of how lead is getting into the system and impacting our wildlife, but also about the practical considerations of transitioning from lead to non-lead ammunition and how to best facilitate it for yourself. Finally, I just want to thank everybody for the incredible outpouring of love that we've received in this hard time, and for the continued support we've had from nearly day one from our community, both locally, regionally, nationally, and even internationally. All is not lost. This is a sad day, but we still do have 17 free-flying condors who are doing wonderfully. And we're going to add more every year, and pretty soon, this year or next, I think we may even be having wild chicks fledged. This is a setback and a sad one, but it's not the end for condors in Yurok ancestral territory and surrounding lands. Thank you for your love and continued support. Walk out.